Our grocery bill is about to get a lot more expensive, and the reason has nothing to do with inflation, nothing to do with supply chains, nothing to do with anything that happened naturally. It is a decision, a deliberate, calculated, political decision made by one man in the White House on Monday. President Trump just imposed 50% tariff on Canadian goods, wine, dairy, hockey sticks, cement, alcohol, beer, whiskey, 50%, on America's closest neighbor, its largest trading partner, a country that shares a nearly 4,000-mile border with the United States, a country that has been America's ally, partner, and friend for over a century. And here is what nobody is telling you. This could be illegal. Let's start with the basics, because most Americans do not know how deeply connected the US and Canadian economies actually are. Canada is not just a neighbor, it is America's #1 trading partner. Last year, the two countries exchanged over $900 billion in goods and services. That is more than America trades with any other country on Earth, including China, including the European Union, including everyone. $900 billion every single year, crossing back and forth across that 4,000-mile border. When you eat breakfast in the morning, there is a good chance Canadian products are on your table. When you fill your gas tank, Canadian oil helped refine that fuel. When your kids play hockey, or drink orange juice, or eat cheese, Canada is part of that supply chain. And Trump just taxed all of it at 50%. Now let's talk about what actually happened, because the White House framing of this and the reality of this are very different things. The White House says these tariffs are retaliation. They say Canada discriminated against American products. They say Canada banned US alcohol from store shelves. They say Canada gave better dairy market access to European countries than to America. They say Canada deserves to be punished. Here is the context the White House did not mention. Canada did those things as a direct response to Trump's own tariffs on Canada that he imposed first. This is a trade war that Trump started. Canada retaliated. Trump is now retaliating against the retaliation, and American consumers are going to pay the price for all of it. The tariffs take effect in 30 days. On August 19th, Washington Times, you have 30 days before prices go up. Here is the legal problem, and this is important. Trump is using Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a section of a Great Depression-era law that has never been used for tariffs before. NPR never, not once in almost 100 years. Although Section 338 has been on the books for a long time, the official said it has not been used for this purpose before, which implies the action could face a legal challenge. Washington Times. So Trump is using a 1930 law that nobody has used before, in a way nobody has used before, to impose 50% tariffs on America's closest ally. Legal experts are already questioning whether this will survive a court challenge, and if it does not, we will have spent months of economic chaos for nothing. Let's talk about what gets taxed, because the list is interesting. The new tariffs apply to Canadian wine, to be hockey sticks, cement, beer, whiskey, cider, spirits, dairy products, and other goods. Wikipedia, hockey sticks. Trump put 50% tariffs on hockey sticks. That is not a joke. That is the actual policy. Washington already has active tariffs ranging from 15 to 50% on Canadian copper, aluminum, and steel, alongside a 25% tax on non-US parts in cars, Wikipedia. So now you add 50% more on wine, dairy, alcohol, cement, on top of what was already there. The question you should be asking is, who pays for this? The answer is simple. You do. American consumers pay tariffs, not Canada, not Canadian companies. American importers pay the tax when the goods cross the border, and they pass that cost on to you. At the grocery store, at the liquor store, at the hardware store. 50% tariff on Canadian cement means American construction costs go up. 50% tariff on Canadian dairy means your cheese gets more expensive. 50% tariff on Canadian wine and whiskey means your next bottle costs more. Every single one of these tariffs is a tax on the American consumer. Now let's talk about Canada's response, because it matters. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a statement that Trump's tariffs are the latest in a series of unilateral U.S. trade actions, in direct violation of the Trilateral Free Trade Agreement, the USMCA. That is the trade deal that was supposed to govern US-Canada-Mexico trade, the deal that Trump himself negotiated in his first term, the deal he called the greatest trade deal in history. He is now violating it, his own trade deal, and Canada is telling the world that America cannot be trusted to honor its own agreements. The move threatens to push prices higher at a time when Americans are already frustrated with the high cost of living ahead of the November 3rd midterm elections. Al Jazeera. Think about that timing. Midterms are November 3rd. These tariffs take effect August 19th. Americans will be paying higher prices for Canadian goods for 2.5 months before they vote. 2.5 months of higher grocery bills, higher construction costs, higher prices at the liquor store, right before they walk into the voting booth. There is a broader picture here that goes beyond Canada specifically. The U.S. Trade Representative said, "No one has retaliated against us, except China and Canada." NPR, read that carefully. The entire world has been hit with Trump tariffs. Every country, every ally, every trading partner, and of all of them, only 2 countries pushed back, China and Canada. Every other country accepted the tariffs, absorbed the economic pain, chose not to fight back. Canada chose differently. Canada said, "These tariffs violate our trade agreement and we will respond." And now Canada is being punished more severely than any other country on earth, except China, for having the nerve to stand up for itself. That is not trade policy. That is a punishment. Let's talk about the Canadian boycott, because this is something American media is not covering enough. Since February 2025, Canadians have been actively boycotting American goods, not just the government, regular Canadian citizens, choosing not to buy American products, choosing not to vacation in the United States, choosing not to cross the border for shopping trips they used to make every weekend. Canadians who used to spend billions of dollars in American border towns are staying home. American businesses that relied on Canadian tourists and shoppers are losing money. The economic damage flows both ways. Trump's tariffs hurt Canadian exporters. The Canadian boycott hurts American businesses. And somewhere in the middle, ordinary Americans and ordinary Canadians are paying the price for a political fight that neither of them started. There is one more piece of this story that almost nobody is discussing. The USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement, is up for renegotiation. All 3 countries, the United States, Canada, Mexico, are supposed to be sitting down to renegotiate the terms of their trade relationship right now. While this is happening, all while they and Mexico are set to renegotiate the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement, NPR. Think about what it means to impose 50% tariffs on a country, while simultaneously asking that country to negotiate a new trade deal with you. Canada is supposed to come to the negotiating table, while Trump is hitting them with the highest tariffs of any American ally on earth. That is not negotiation, that is coercion, and the rest of the world is watching. Every country that has a trade agreement with the United States is watching what happens to Canada. They are asking themselves, if America can tear up the USMCA, its own trade deal, with its closest ally, what does any American trade agreement actually mean? What is the point of negotiating a deal if the other side can simply ignore it whenever it becomes inconvenient? Let's bring this back to your kitchen table, because that is where this actually lands. August 19th. That is when these tariffs take effect. 30 days from now. Canadian dairy, more expensive. Canadian wine and whiskey, more expensive. Canadian cement and construction materials more expensive, on top of the tariffs that were already there, on top of inflation that is already eating into American paychecks, on top of energy costs that are already elevated because of the Iran war. Americans are already frustrated with the cost of living. The move threatens to push prices higher at a time when Americans are already frustrated with the high cost of living ahead of the November 3rd midterm elections. Al Jazeera. And the White House's answer to that frustration is to make it more expensive to buy Canadian cheese. Here is the question that every American should be asking right now. What is the end game? What does winning this trade war with Canada actually look like? Canada is not going to become the 51st state. Canada is not going to stop retaliating against tariffs that hit their economy. Canada is not going to simply accept whatever terms America demands and say thank you. Canada has other options. They can deepen trade relationships with Europe, with Asia.